Hi, I'm George Gerbo, and welcome to Washington Times Weekly, where we get a chance to sit down with our reporters and talk about their latest coverage of news and events. Joining me on this edition is esteemed Washington Times national politics reporter Seth McLaughlin. Seth, it's good to see you again.
George, always great to see you.
Likewise. Let's dive in first with what is becoming a trend among Democrats that are continuing to distance themselves from the party and former President Biden. Karine Jean-Pierre, the former White House press secretary, has said that she's now going to become an independent, as well as launching a new book that'll be published in the fall. But you've written about Rahm Emanuel, the former Chicago mayor and ambassador in the Biden administration, who says that he's starting to have some doubts and start to put forth some of his misgivings and some of the holdups that the Biden administration had during his time serving in the administration.
Yeah, there's sort of two separate tracks here, right? With Karine Jean-Pierre, it kind of seems like a cash grab to me after you've been sitting there, defending Biden and basically, smacking down anyone in the media who would question his mental capabilities for months and months and months from the White House podium. On the flip side, with Rahm Emanuel and other Democrats, the distance yourself from Biden is sort of becoming this early 2028 potential candidate litmus test where, in some way, shape, or form, they feel like they have to assure voters that they either didn't know anything about Biden, they were totally blindsided by it, or, come up with some sort of explanation that eases the clear concerns that voters had as to why Democrats tried to foist Biden upon the country for another 4-year term before, eventually pulling the plug after his disastrous debate against Trump in Atlanta. So Rahm was on a podcast with Tim Miller. Tim Miller is a longtime GOP strategist turned, I believe he's an independent now, left the party over Trump. But Tim was kind of grilling Rahm on, why he didn't step up and do more to tell Biden's inner circle that they need to, basically give him the boot, or it's time to move on and start shifting the focus towards a primary campaign rather than a reelection campaign. And Rahm said, he basically said the criticism is somewhat fair. It's hard because he was serving as ambassador to Japan, and he's 14 hours away, whatever the flight is to Tokyo. But he did say that the Biden himself and the White House showed an arrogance in their unwillingness to listen to people outside their bubble, and that the country is now paying a price for that. So, I think you're going to see more and more of this. And it's going to be interesting to see the degree to which people try to cleave themselves away from Biden, and those who perhaps even try to stick up for him as they try to carve out some sort of lane in the early jockeying for position among those 2028 Democratic presidential candidates.
Let's move to the Senate now, which has received President Trump's big, beautiful bill, as he calls it. The Senate, however, looking for more and perhaps deeper spending cuts than the House version that was passed just a few weeks ago. The current package includes $1.7 trillion in spending cuts, but new spending in the bill, as well as additional tax cuts, totals $4 trillion. So there's a net deficit there, a pretty substantial one. And Senate Majority Leader John Thune, as you've written, is one that wants to perhaps see more changes, more balancing of that, and leveling out some of that deficit.
Well, yeah, he's got to keep everyone in line, right? And so part of the beef right now within the caucus among certain members is spending levels. And more than anything else, the national debt is really becoming more and more of a talking point. Now, we've seen this happen in the past, and we've also seen the national debt continue to climb and climb and climb and climb. It's at about 36 trillion right now. The nation added about 8 trillion, a little over 8 trillion under President Biden during his 4 years, and almost 8 trillion under President Trump during his first term. So there is like a legitimate interest in trying to get a handle on that. But when push comes to shove, generally, people cave, and it's more spending and more tax cuts, and therefore higher deficits and higher debt. But in this case, the real interesting wild card is Elon Musk, the world's richest man. He was arguably the face of the administration's efforts to, or he was the face of the administration's efforts to downsize the federal government, to reduce the size of the federal workforce, to sort of rethink and reshape the federal government, the way it works, and pose the question whether taxpayers are getting their best bang for the buck, right? And now that Elon has left that position, it seems as if, I don't know if he's got an axe to grind or what it is, but he's definitely unhappy with the size and scope of the bill that Trump and Republicans are trying to shepherd through Congress. And he has come out, on a daily basis this week to basically trash it. And, I think, like, I don't know, a week ago, you would have thought this bill was going to cruise through Congress. But when you get the world's richest man with a massive megaphone of his social media platform, it's sort of, it's a little bit more of a jump ball. I think, most people think Republicans will get their ducks in a row and that they will ultimately get the support to pass the bill in some way, shape, or form. But Elon is a total wild card. The fact him and Trump are sort of starting to get into this in almost a personal way, where Elon today said, if it wasn't for him and the 250 million he invested in Trump's campaign, I think he invested another 20 million into Republican campaigns across the country, that Trump wouldn't be president. He wouldn't have won re-election, and Republicans wouldn't have their majorities, that their slim majorities that they're leaning on to pass the big beautiful bill. Which, again, like, this is the anchor of Trump's economic plan in his second term in office. So there's a lot riding on this politically for him, and it's just interesting, the juxtaposition between having the world's richest man inside the house and having the world's richest man outside the house.
Still a lot of negotiations yet to be figured out on the Senate side. One of those senators will be involved in that, Senior Senator John Cornyn of Texas. He is perhaps facing an uphill battle to his fifth term in the Senate as he's running for reelection. And it appears that Texas State Attorney General Ken Paxton may be pretty formidable, at least according to some recent polling that you've written about.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the super early stages of this stuff, but the race in Texas between Cornyn and Paxton is definitely getting eyeballs, right? You got a deep red state like Texas where, the hardcore activists basically control the primary, and they want someone who's going to be tossing around red meat and is going full MAGA and full conservative and all that stuff. And so John Cornyn has been an animal of Washington for a long period of time. That's not to say he hasn't notched a bunch of conservative wins for the people of Texas. But it is to say, just vis-a-vis being in Washington for a period of time, there is sort of a opening for someone who wants to paint him as as too tied to Washington and too disconnected from the true Texas values, which I believe is the way Attorney General Ken Paxton says it. And Paxton, he's been a big Trump ally. He's had a lot of controversy surrounding him regarding an extramarital affair and allegations of corruption, which led to some court battles. But he's politically still very much alive and very much thriving within today's GOP. And these early polls suggest, at the very least, that Cornyn, has a fight on his hands. And the other part of this is we still don't know whether Representative Wesley Hunt of Texas, also another sort of MAGA figure, who has fully embraced Trump, is going to run, because he has flirted with the possibility. So Cornyn, being who he is, kind of a staple of the GOP here in Washington, the staple of party leadership for a long time. He was often an ally of Senate Minority Leader and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is, considered no friend to the MAGA faithful. So, again, it's definitely one to watch. It's an inter-party battle in Washington, and us in the media love inter-party battles, and frankly, so do activists.
Oh yes, yeah, and still a long way to go before voters head to the polls in the Texas primary. But It's never too early to start laying out the landscape, especially as this Trump administration and this term rolls on. Seth, I
Yeah.
appreciate the time as always. Thanks so much.
George, thanks, man.
You can catch all of Seth's work online at WashingtonTimes.com as well as on social media. I'm George Gerbo. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.